So I'm going to welcome Jonah Rapino back onto the Chillinois podcast, and I am going to say hi to Laura, who is appearing for her first time on the Chillinois podcast. Go ahead and say hello, the both of you.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Thank you, Cole, so much for having us. I'm excited. I've been, as Jonah knows, listening. I think I listened probably to your very first podcast ever back in 2019 or something. So 2020. So really excited to be on.
Yeah.
And really nice to be back in the show. This is Jonah. I'm the director of marketing for NuEra.
Yeah. And that show you're referring to was released on April 15th, 2019, which means we are approaching our birthday of the Chillinois podcast.
Happy birthday. That's awesome.
Thanks for joining us ahead of that. Well, Jonah, I know you may chime in from time to time, and if folks haven't listened to our episodes with you, I will have the links to those episodes in the podcast so that if they want to learn a little bit. Actually, Jonah, give yourself a short introduction, and then I want to have Laura. I want to hear Laura's backstory, and if people want to hear, a little bit more about you, then they can check out those podcasts. But I want so they know who you are.
Excellent. Jonah, director of marketing. I've been with NuEra for about 3 years here in Illinois. I originally started in the cannabis industry in Massachusetts. Working with a company out there called Revolutionary Clinics, not connected with Revolution, but kind of cut my teeth out there. Had an amazing experience in the medical program there, and then helped transition into recreational in Massachusetts, and then since came to Illinois. And wow, Massachusetts has gone through quite a change since then. I believe there's more dispensaries in this tiny state of Massachusetts than there are in the entirety of this massive state called Illinois. So quite a different scene. But here we are in the precipice of a major growth spurt here in Illinois. So it's exciting times.
Yeah.
Cole, the thing that I would say is, quite surprising and underwhelming for a marketing guy. Jonah never quite hypes himself up as much as he should. So I tell people that when I say Jonah's a rock star, I mean it literally. Because before joining the wild world of cannabis, Jonah was literally a world touring musician for years and years and years. And it's I don't know, I like to hype it up. I think that's so
true.
Cool.
Former life. I had a great time on the road playing music, and experience.
How many countries did you go to, Jonah?
Many countries. But actually, the thing I always like to say is I've been in all 48 lower states. On tour in a van. So I still need to hit Hawaii and Alaska. And the goal would be to do it in a van still, somehow. I don't know, Hawaii might be difficult, but we'll see.
The ganja bus.
The ganja bus, which we'll be talking about later.
Yeah.
Well, Laura, thank you, Jonah, for reintroducing yourself. Again, folks, we've had Jonah on in the past. If you want to listen to those episodes, we'll have the links in the podcast description. Laura, I'm really excited to have you on today. And I just wanted to start. We spoke a little bit before we got on air, and it sounds like you have a very interesting backstory. Please, I'd love to hear how you made your way from Colombia, if I recall correctly, all the way to how you found yourself where you are today.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's been a really roundabout way. I definitely think everyone in cannabis always has. Not everyone, I guess some people have really been in cannabis their whole careers, but the great majority of us, with this being a fairly new industry, have a previous life somewhere else. So going back to Colombia, I grew up, I was born in Colombia, and I lived there until I was 14. And this is really some of the darkest times in Colombian history, right? So I was a teenager in the late 90s, early 2000s, when Colombia was pretty much going what was essentially a civil war, drug-fueled violence, cartels, the FARC, guerrillas, etc. And so actually my family moved to the US in 2001. I was 14 at the time, and we applied for asylum. It was very much a security situation. And, my dad was threatened. There was a time where my school bus had armed guards going to and from school. I had classmates whose siblings had been kidnapped. It was really a really painful and difficult time in Colombian history. My family moved to the U.S. as refugees. We requested asylum when we showed up, and in some cosmically terrible timing, we actually moved to the U.S. in July of 2001, and a couple months later, the September 11 attacks happened, and kind of the whole world went upside down. So yeah, I showed up in the U.S. age 14, didn't really speak English, and kind of had to start over from scratch, and so because of that history uh, of what Colombia has gone through in the war of drugs, always very interested in this idea of drug reform and in this idea of how the criminalization of drugs really has these incredibly violent and painful impacts for different communities. And so always kind of intellectually interested, but not really directly involved. I started my career actually in the US in media. I worked for a sort of Latin American 60-minute style show. I was the executive producer for that show for a few years. And then I helped start a small development company that would develop shows for big streamers. So like if you were going to develop a show for Netflix or Disney or Amazon, but you were looking to have Latin American audience or it wasn't Spanish, those were the things that we were working on. So I've been working on that for a few years, and actually it was a family connection that opened up that first opportunity to come work in cannabis. My boyfriend at the time, who's my husband, his father, and really along with him, he had really been some of the original players here in Illinois. They had applied for some of the original medical licenses way back in 2014, 2015. So the first few years of the industry were much, smaller, slower, really a program that was really finding its feet. And they'd been kind of running those for a couple of years. And in 2019, when the adult use law came into effect, or at least was announced that it was going to come into effect in 2020, it was like everyone's hair is on fire, all hands on situation. Like, how are we going to handle this? What's going to happen and what's going to change? Like, we have this like really kind of small team, small company that's doing this. What do we need to do to manage this transition? And I said, you know what? It's an all hands on deck situation. I'll come and help out for a couple of months. And here we are 4 years later. It just kind of sucked me in and never let me go. Never let me go again. So with NuEra, I've gotten to see what has been really an incredible period of transformation. And so when I started, we were still new med, only 3 dispensaries, and really was involved in everything that has happened since, from building up our team. I remember actually one of the very first things that I did was find Jonah, because we didn't have any marketing person at all. I mean, to give you a sense, when I joined the company, we didn't have Google Maps listings. It's how basic things were. Growing the team, hiring a bunch, opening up all of our secondary locations, eventually acquiring that cultivation center in 2020 that used to be PharmaCann's, that became the NuEra Cultivation Center, applying for a bunch of social equity licenses along with social equity partners, just like COVID, all of the turmoil that has been the last few years, I've sort of been involved with. And ever since November, I've then taken on as COO of the company. And so that's how we ended up here.
Awesome. Thanks for going through all that. I mean, I forgive me for assuming, but was cannabis a major part of your life, like in Colombia and stuff? I'm trying to see how you jumped from media to cannabis.
No, cannabis, it's funny too. And this is an interesting part of cannabis. When we talk about how like the risk and how the risk kind of disproportionately impacts certain communities. The truth is, because I've always been on some sort of visa, always been, even today, I'm not a US citizen. I was always so terrified that I was going to get deported if I was anywhere near cannabis, that I actually didn't even try it until I started working with the company. Like, on principle, always on board, just sort of philosophically, but it always felt like the risk was too much and I had too much to lose. And so it just, like I said, at first, when I first joined, it was very much like let's figure out this like huge business problem that we have. And then I've really been introduced to the world of cannabis beyond that, and sort of seeing the impact it has on people's lives, and really gotten to know a lot more of the culture around it, and obviously gotten to experience it myself in very different ways, and really grown to love and appreciate it from that perspective. But it wasn't, the reason that I ended up here was never intended to be long term, and it wasn't like it is for a lot of people. It wasn't that I was passionate about cannabis itself when I started, right? It was just a thing I believed kind of philosophically made sense from like a legal and societal perspective, but not really a personal preference at the time, right? Since then, of course, things have changed a lot, but yeah.
Where did you live in Colombia? Not that I'm necessarily going to know. I only know one town in Colombia, and it's Medellin or Medellin.
Medellin. Medellin, yeah. I grew up in a town called Pereira. It's actually culturally and geographically pretty similar to Medellin. It's in the mountains. It's a coffee growing region. It's maybe a 4-hour drive from Medellin, but it's it's got that beautiful rolling hills, coffee, kind of like mild weather situation that people have grown to love from Colombia for sure.
Yeah. Well, hey, we've got some really cool topics that I'm so glad that I'm so excited rather to discuss, including the idea of home grow. I'd love for you to maybe take on some misconceptions of the cannabis industry. But before we get into any of that, you're from NuEra, and I'm under the understanding that you've got new brands and everything. And so out of respect for that, I wanted to give you an opportunity to plug, the relaunch. It looks like there's a legacy brand. I don't know exactly what's going on, so the floor is yours.
Absolutely. Yeah. So Legacy, Legacy is now what used to be the NuEra Cultivation Center. So back in November, the ownership group of NuEra at the time decided to split the company. And so what was formerly the NuEra Cultivation Center is now no longer associated with NuEra. Ownership's no longer associated. They've become an independent cultivation center. That's the legacy. That's now what has become the Legacy brand. And we, NuEra continues to run all of our retail cultivation. That being said, I think we really see the importance, and we see it as paramount that in order to be the best cannabis company we could be in the space, we have to be able to be bringing really top-notch product that is I think consistent with the vision for what we want to bring to the market, that we could really offer something that is unique and that is ours. And so we've been working really hard to find a way that we can continue to bring NuEra brands. So we have actually a partnership with IESO that we're really excited to announce. We've been working with them for months and months. We brought in a cultivator from California and really a person that has truly decades of experience making like top-notch, absolute top shelf cannabis, what you would come to expect from the California market, of course. And we've been working for months to improve operations. We're going to be bringing new strains that are going to start hitting shelves really soon. And we really reached a deal where we're going to be reserving the very best quality flower and concentrates to be part of the NuEra brand. So we're going to be doing primarily high testing THC, really great bud structure, indoor, prioritizing indoor flower versus greenhouse, because we think that could really get you the sort of bud structure we're looking for. We're going to be focusing on only live extracts for that brand. So really the best stuff that's going to be coming out is going to be NuEra brand. Some of it is going to be a little different from what people are used to from our brand, because we won't be having some of the strains that we had before when we were at the Hillcrest Cultivation Center that is now Legacy. But I think we're bringing in some really good product we're very excited about. So yeah, it's going to be in shelves really soon, and I hope you'll let us know what you think when you try it.
In fact, it'll start hitting the NuEra shelves possibly later this week. So we kind of have some sneak peeks on our new era coming to our NuEra dispensaries around the state, and then we'll be offering that out to other retailers in the very near future as well.
Cool. Well, you may have heard it here first, folks. Check it
First
out.
drop.
There you go. Well, cool. Anything else to mention with regard to the relaunch? I know, Jonah, you had also mentioned you wanted to talk about a Jamaica giveaway, so I wanted to make sure to mention that at the top. But before we move to that, I wanted to, anything else with regard to relaunch and new stuff?
Yeah. Laura, do you want to speak to the Interstate 420 brand?
Oh, you take it. Come on.
Okay. So as
yeah.
well as launching the new NuEra, we've are also going to be introducing a new brand under our umbrella that's called Interstate 420. So we're encouraging people to take the highway and take the trip that they're looking to take with our products. So this is a really kind of fun road themed experience. So we're going to be packaging up the best of our kind of greenhouse flower in 3.5s and 7s, and we're going to be offering pre-roll multi-packs and then other types of vape carts. So not your live resin premium vape carts that are coming under the NuEra brand, but your more distillate with terpenes from, or actually sauce. Sorry, we're going to be introducing a really cool sauce part. So we're pulling the terpenes and things like that from the specific strains that we're using in that greenhouse flower and introducing it back on a really excellent way that I think is going to be very flavorful and very impactful, as it were. And then we're looking to also potentially do some concentrates under the I-420 brand as well. And then as a special thing that's going on right now, since it's 420 times leading up to that, we have a product called Heavy Freight. So that is our kind of like trucking theme for Interstate 420. So we're packaging up ounces of flour. And this is really nice stuff. And we just right now have an abundance and we want to share it with everyone. So we packaged that up, and that's going out at $180 pre-tax for ounces of flour right now that you can find at NuEra. So definitely check out our menus for that. And then, keep your eyes peeled for a lot more fun products coming out of both NuEra and Interstate 420. And if I can plug 2 more products real quick, under the Interstate 420, we're also dabbling with some edibles. So we have something we're calling the Interstellar 420. And it's space cakes. So we've put together a package of some really delicious brownies, which is oddly hard to find as an edible in Illinois. So we kind of took inspiration from the space cakes, which is famous in Amsterdam as a very potent brownie or baked good. So we released that as well for the kind of 420 celebrations. So you can find space cakes under the Interstellar 420 moniker at NuEra as well.
Will those be like, I don't even know if you can do this in Illinois, so feel free to be like, Cole, you can't even do that. Will they be like, I know they can't be dosed higher than 100 milligrams, but what I'm asking is like, are they like higher dosed? You said they're free, or are you just playing on the pun?
We're playing on the pun. It's kind of a nod to the history, of THC infused edibles coming out of Amsterdam's really the kind of the famous place where that really kicked off worldwide, right? So we just took that moniker. These are going to be 10 milligram brownie bites, packaged up at 5 pieces per pack, because we also want to make it available if you just want to get one and try it out. You don't have to spend all the money to get the full 100 milligram packs. So these are 50 milligram packs, but they're priced very, very low. So, if you want to get 1 to 10, please feel free. They're delicious. Honestly, you can't stop eating them, by the way.
They're so good. That's the problem. Yeah. The problem is that you just, I wish that we would sell them without THC, so I could just keep eating them after I get the munchies with them. They're really good. They're really good. And go ahead.
I was going to say the pro tip I will give to folks that are listening is just before you go and grab a brownie from the dispensary, also make a pan of brownies so that you can continue to eat brownies without, you can always eat more, but you can't eat less. That's what I always like to say.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And the pro tip actually from one of our dispensary employees is like pop them in the microwave like 15 seconds and they get like really melty, just it's great. Just do it, try it, maybe do a little ice cream with it. It's really, and I think we have such few baked products, and brownies in particular are such a classic item. And it's just one that there isn't a lot of options for in the market, right? There's not a lot of good baked goods, and so we're excited to bring this on.
Absolutely. And unless you don't have anything else to mention with regard to new products and brands, well, like I said, Jonah, you mentioned the Jamaica giveaway, which can we be candid about? Let's be candid about it. You asked if you could speak on it, and I asked you I was kind of like, yes, as long as the trip's covered, right?
Yeah.
So,
Absolutely. So this is our second year running this giveaway competition for a trip to Jamaica. So it's a ganja themed vacation package in Jamaica. And this year we listened to the feedback, and we are offering round trip airfare for 2 people as part of the grand prize. So you can win this amazing trip to Jamaica. You can enter online. If you go to the @NuEra Cannabis Instagram account, you can enter right there. Very easy, no purchase necessary. Just throw your name in there. And then the other fun thing is that we have ways for people to earn extra entry points. And you can do that by coming to our store. We have a way that you're going to get 9 extra entry points if you come in and basically do this fun kind of photo thing with us there. And that's huge because you get 1 entry point for entering, 2 for tagging a friend, and then that extra 9 comes in when you come hang out with our staff and friends at NuEra dispensary anywhere in Illinois. And then another thing to say, it's a partnership with ganjavacations.net. So they offer these vacation packages to anybody. You can go to their website, and in fact, you get 15% off of a trip there just by entering our competition. Say you don't win. So it's a really excellent company and opportunity. So basically, you get picked up right from the airport. You're taken directly to an herb house, which is the legal dispensaries that are in Jamaica, to kind of check that out. And then you're brought down to the resort. So this is a resort that is literally in the water, like surrounded on 3 sides by beautiful Jamaican water, kind of south of Negril. And you have a room that has an ocean view. There's breakfast included. And then there's a tour of a ganja farm as well. That's also included. So you get to go to the very famous part of West Jamaica, Orange Hill, which is just really known for the most top quality cannabis in Jamaica. So we're just really excited to offer this again this 420 season. It's still possible to enter, and the drawing will be at midnight on 420.
perfect. Well, Jonah, if you could send me a link to that post, we'll put it in the podcast description for the folks that are listening.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And it's I'll send that to you. It's really easy. It's nueracannabis.com/ganja vacations. But I will send that.
Cool. NuEra.com/ganja vacations. You said?
Yeah, with an S. Yeah.
Cool. So I'm going to it right now, folks. We'll also have the link in the podcast description. I think I may have had a typo there. Ganja vacation. We'll have a link in the podcast description for you folks, so that you can enter to win this prize. And yeah, that was what I was alluding to, Jonah. Thank you for being candid about it. I was like, we can talk about it, but I want to make sure these people are flown out there. I don't want, I don't want them to have to pay for their flight. So this is the graphic for folks that want to check them out on Instagram. there's the graphic again. We'll have a link to enter in the podcast description. So, well, cool.
Someone's gonna win.
Hell yeah, somebody's gonna go to Jamaica. If you win, folks, if you're a listener and you win, send us pictures and stuff. We'll share it on the podcast. It'd be cool to see what you see on the ganja tour and stuff like that. So well, so I'm just looking at some notes that I took beforehand and I've been adding as we talk. I'm trying to think of maybe the best place to start off. Well, you talked about new cultivation centers. I want to talk about how acquisitions work, but one of the other things that caught my ear, Jonah, last time we spoke, is that you had considered the potential of using solar energy, and I wasn't sure. Is that something we are able to discuss today, or is it anything that's progressed?
I can
That'd
talk
be a
about
little
it a
bit
little
different.
bit. Yeah, I
Sure.
can talk about it a little bit. And what I would say is that it's not something that has progressed enough that there's any like specific announcement to it. But one of the things, that we as a company are concerned about and aware of when we think about the cannabis industry is actually its tremendous um, environmental impact. Right? It takes a lot of energy to grow cannabis in Illinois, where you're essentially growing it under like massive grow lights that consumes really high levels of energy. So one of the things that we're working on and thinking about as we grow our cultivation operations, et cetera, is how can we help mitigate some of that? And so one of the things that we're working on is exploring the possibility of supporting, perhaps investing, perhaps partnering, or just like supporting with like the local authorities. Is just the expansion of solar options nearby, close enough to where we have cultivation operations that we could be using that energy directly in the cultivation centers. So yeah, it's a very real issue. Right now the state is adamantly not allowing outdoor grow. I think, as far as I understand, and I'm not an expert, it's still caught up in the lawsuit. They had provided a permit to Nature's Grace, and I think they were the only ones that were given a permit to do an outdoor grow for a couple of years, and then the state took that variance or that permit that they had to do that away, and they haven't allowed any other cultivators to have outdoor grows. And so everything that we are growing right now in the state is either grown in industrial indoor facilities, or it's being grown in greenhouses, which are a little bit less energy efficient, but still quite supported with electric energy. So it's one of the things that we're exploring and thinking about. And sustainability is a problem for our industry. It's a problem not just at the grow level; it's a problem at the packaging level. For example, child-proof packaging requires so much material, and a lot of times the easiest way to make child-proof packaging is by using plastic. It's a lot harder to find good recyclable or paper-based products that can meet all of the compliance requirements. So yeah, these are some of the things that we're thinking about as we think about how to have a more sustainable company. Same with transportation, right? We have to. There isn't really a very efficient way to distribute product because it essentially has to be going always straight from cultivation to the dispensary. There aren't more centralized distribution centers that could, let you do one big trip. And for example, if you're a cultivation center like Arise, which is very, very, very far away from Chicago, and the majority of the dispensaries in the state, which are all kind of concentrated in the Chicagoland area. And if you're like way in southern Illinois, or like Nature's Grace is also pretty far, those types of cultivators, they don't really have a very good way to transport the product without just essentially making a trip for every single delivery, and that's not on them at all. It's just the way the regulation is written. You can't
Yeah.
store product overnight anywhere else. You just have to make a trip every single time. So we're thinking about ways that we could be more efficient with all of those things, and our energy used all around.
Awesome. Well, hey, I want to just, to your point, let's share a clip that I've been trying to make more well known. It's about the the crazy regulations you as operators have to deal with regard to transport. It's just a 3-minute video, so let's watch it, and I think it's going to prove, or it's going to kind of emphasize your point. So I'm going to share my screen, and then we'll come right back to this topic. Whoops.
Yeah, I can't hear the audio.
Yeah, sorry, I had the audio muted there. Thank you for catching me on that. All right, here we go.
Now, NBC5 investigates. Illinois has very tight rules for how cannabis can be transported and delivered.
In fact, those rules are stricter than the federal guidelines for opioids, the most abused drug in America. Here's the story from Phil Rogers.
Do we have more to grab? Yeah.
We're at a distribution center for Cresco Labs in suburban Chicago. And what these workers are loading
3365
is one of the most tightly controlled cargoes in America. The cargo is legal cannabis, at least legal in the eyes of the state of Illinois. But the rules for how it's transported are spelled out in pages of state regulations.
Security is aware of every shipment that goes out, where it's heading, what time they should arrive.
That security actually starts all the way back when the cannabis plants are grown. Each plant receives its own barcoded number. And those numbers follow the plants and their products through processing here at Cresco's suburban facilities, all the way through packaging, transport, and delivery to dispensaries statewide.
Correct. And we refer to as seed to sale.
Illinois law requires cannabis transporters to move their wares in vehicles where the products are locked tight in a separate compartment. Then there's a second set of locked doors outside. The trucks can't be marked, and at least one crew member has to stay in the vehicle at all times.
What is this? This is our tracking software platform.
Cresco's fleet is monitored in real time. Onboard cameras provide a view inside and outside the trucks, and GPS will alert the company if the truck tries to cross state lines.
We know exactly where they're at all times.
But there's a bit of irony here. Remember, in the eyes of the federal government, cannabis is still illegal. But the Illinois guidelines for transporting pot are much stricter than the federal rules for moving much more dangerous drugs.
It was very casual. All of the product would go into my personal vehicle in just a standard Coleman cooler.
Cresco's logistics manager, Joseph Franks, told us he used to work for a major hospital, transporting everything from chemotherapy drugs to prescription painkillers.
Where would it be in the car?
It would be in my back seat.
The DEA's position on moving even the most abused drugs in America, opioids like OxyContin, is that licensees are simply responsible for getting them where they are supposed to go. The federal regs say all applicants and registrants shall provide effective controls and procedures to guard against theft and diversion of controlled substances.
We do have millions and millions of controlled substances that are moved through the system, through the mail, through UPS, through FedEx.
Former DEA agent Jack Titleman now works as a consultant on compliance with drug regulations.
If you decide that your method of distribution is on the back of a bicycle and on a backpack because that fits into that neighborhood and you've never had an issue, then that might be the correct way of making that delivery into that neighborhood.
2811.
That is not the case with marijuana in Illinois.
Illinois is the most heavily regulated state that we operate in.
Heavily regulated and lucrative, with nearly 1.8.
That's
Now you're muted.
Yeah, now I'm muted. That's basically it. I just wanted to prove your point that we're treating this like it's uranium, and so the overhead involved, not only I know we were kind of talking about ecological impact, but the reason I thought of that when you said ecological impact, it was that very last point that you could deliver cannabis on a bicycle if you wanted to, or sorry, opioids on a bicycle if you wanted to, which I thought was striking.
Yeah, and here's a funny the way to think about it. So, or not that funny, I guess, depending how you think about it. We're working with ISO now for the distribution of our products. You can't have product on the road earlier than a certain time. I think there's 4 a.m. or something like that. And you can't store it overnight anywhere. And so if you think about product that needs to leave from the ISO facility all the way down Carbondale, and it needs to make it to Maple Glen in Rockford, and that's a 9-hour drive, you're doing most of that time is just like that entire drive. And so you can't bring enough product that you're going to be doing lots of deliveries. So you're having what's essentially an 18-hour round trip with 2 people in the car, tracked with all the cameras, et cetera, just to deliver a very small amount of product. It's inefficient, not just from a sustainable perspective, but it's inefficient cost wise. And so, there's lots of reasons that make cannabis so expensive in Illinois. Obviously, one of them is competition, and I think that's one that consumers focus a lot on. But the regulatory structure that we deal with makes it so that operations are extremely expensive. Sometimes regulations are great and they're for the protection of the consumer and for the protection of the public, but sometimes, some of them are not entirely logical, and it's hard, right? So IUSO actually happens to be next to one of the largest flight schools in America, and it's actually right next door to an airport. And one of the questions that they asked way at the beginning of this was, can we transport it by plane? But airspace is federally regulated, and so that's a big no-no. Although, of course, it would be much safer and like much fewer possibilities of there being issues along the way. But transportation is an issue, and one of the ironic things is the state issued a bunch of transportation licenses, 200 and some transportation licenses, and those social equity operators are really struggling. They spent, I've worked and met many of them, my time working with NuEra. I've spent a lot of time working with social equity applicants and licensees, and essentially they spend a lot of time, a lot of money, as you know, if you've been following what's happened in our state, waited for years to all these lawsuits to get figured out, and they got transportation licenses, and there really isn't a very good use case for them. We don't have delivery. We don't have any ability to do kind of distribution centers, as I've discussed. And so a lot of people I know have spent a lot of their money and time and sweat and tears working for these licenses, and there's really very little that they can do with them. It's just because of the way that the regulations are set up right now.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. Well, in the spirit of, cutting costs and everything, I was going to bring up the topic of outdoor cultivation because I've heard about that as well. So you're saying that as far as you know, that people aren't granted this variance anymore?
I have heard directly from the Department of Agriculture that they are absolutely not doing outdoor grow permits right now. And I believe the claim is that the CRTA, the law that governs how we grow cannabis, doesn't allow it. I don't know. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know exactly what the language is, but I do know that they're not allowing outdoor grow anywhere in the state right now.
Right. But you mentioned that some operators had gotten a temporary variance. So it had happened in the past, right?
Yeah. And it happened in the past. I think, I don't know if there was one other cultivator. I know Nature's Grace had a permit, and they did a couple of seasons. I want to say maybe they got 2 outdoor seasons. As far as I understand, it needed to be all for extraction. You couldn't do smokable flower outdoors. But because of the definitions of how cultivation needs to be secured, the department has decided not to issue any additional permits, including with them. So
got it. Yeah, the reason I ask about that is because it seems not only would it be sustainable, but we were just talking about like needing capital, and there's all these craft cultivators that have been trying to push for the 14,000 square feet, which is great. Like, I'm supportive of that, but think about the overhead of an indoor cultivation facility versus that outdoor. And in a time when these people need capital, it's interesting to hear that was allowed in the past. And we've even heard the perspective from employees that worked in those fields, and like you said, from their perspective, they were told it's only to be used for concentrates and edibles. But like, I was surprised to hear that. I was like, are you sure that that's happened? They're like, oh yeah, I'm sure. I was in that field for 3 summers in a row.
I've seen pictures. I didn't see it myself. I've seen pictures of it. It 100% happened. and it's not happening anymore. I think some of the concerns from the state, and this is just something I heard in a conversation with a state regulator, concerns include just pesticides and contamination from nearby fields. You can't really contain it, which brings us to another topic, which has to do with the testing standards in Illinois, which are probably some of the highest in the country. When you think about, and as we've been working with IESO to bring new cultivation practices, to kind of upgrade some systems, to bring in strains, to do all these things so we can flower to market, NuEra flower, working with a Californian. And this guy has got 30 years of experience. He's done indoor, outdoor, he's done legal, sort of legal, pre there being any legal. This guy knows his stuff and has worked in various states in the country, etc. And it's just shocked every time the testing comes back, because the parts per million of specific contaminants or pesticides or mold or bacteria are so much lower that they are in other states. And again, it goes back to what's your risk tolerance? Some regulation is excellent. We want to make sure people aren't getting moldy product or product with pesticides or product with solvents. But when the thresholds are so low, the result is product that people complain about. That's why a lot of Illinois product has to be remediated, or that's why it's too dry, because you really have to dry it to make sure that you're not failing testing. The testing is a huge part of what you have to think about day in, day out as a cultivator, and the standards are influencing every decision about the product that you're seeing on the shelves, and the testing standards are far stricter than most other legal markets in the country.
The way I think about it is Colorado. So a product that is grown and sold and enjoyed and is safe in Colorado for 90% of the time would fail testing in Illinois.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
That's just the easiest way to think about it. It just doesn't make any sense. If it works in Colorado, it's safe, then why can't we have similar standards here in Illinois? Because we then would have much fresher, much moister, and a lot more variety. You know what I mean? Because you have to whittle it down to specific strains that are going to be able to survive that that lab process that's so strict in Illinois. So it's actually keeping Illinois from having a larger diversity of strains. So,
yeah, well, and it affects your dry cure process. It affects your dry cure process. It leads some cultivators to use things like ozone and things of that nature. And at the end of the day, I'm not a doctor and I'm not a biochemist, and I don't have opinions about how safe is safe and whether our product ends up being safer than what you might see in Colorado. I don't have an opinion on that. I don't know, but I do know that those testing standards affect the cultivation practices and affect ultimately the look and feel and the quality of product that consumers are getting on the shelves.
Yeah, I mean, many people say, including myself, that you get some weed from a dispensary and it doesn't matter really from who. It's dry. It's just really dry, and
it is very, very, very difficult to pass your, mold and microbial testing if you don't control your humidity to an extreme. And so that's a lot of the reasons why your product is much drier than you would find in California and you would find in Colorado, because their products, if you tested them here, they would fail. And you see it all the time. You'll have these beautiful entire batches of product that looks fantastic, that's terpy, that smells great, and it fails by a little bit, and it just has to go to extraction. So it's one of the ways in which the rules that we're operating under end up influencing what consumers ultimately have access to.
And how much do you think those rules play into the Illinois cannabis market sort of being a CPG market? Because it's like you almost have to have those regulations as strict as they are if it must be CPG. It's like trying to put lettuce into a jar. Like, yeah, it's gonna fucking mold. you know.
Well,
Yeah,
I,
yeah.
I think you have a point there, but you're also going to find, you know, that there are always innovations and people who are dealing with the limitations, right? So you're you know, there's definitely some cultivators out there, you know, who doesn't love Jenny Kush from Arise. You know, despite all the things that hoops they have to jump through, it's amazing. Revolution, putting out some amazing flower. I'll toot our own horn, NuEra, especially under the new cultivation practices that we're putting in place. Very high quality flower. It's not, you know, we're dealing with the issues and we're rising above, and that's what we're going to have to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, you have to package it in something. Some of our products come in glass, some of them comes in Mylar. You know what I mean? And you know, we're just doing the best that we can and making a really, really great product.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Wouldn't it be cool though if we had deli style cannabis in Illinois? So you just smell it in a jar, and then it would lend itself to. I know I'd love to hear if you have any initiatives for sustainable packaging, because that's an important topic for me. But that would make it so that, like, speaking of Colorado, I've been able to go back to dispensaries I've traveled to, and I've saved the container, and they give me a discount. They're like, "Oh yeah, $15 off because you brought your container back. Now we don't have to use another container. It doesn't cost us money. You know, we're helping the environment." That whole idea. So that's why
$15 off.
yeah. So, so I brought that up because of the idea of sustainable packaging. Obviously, given the regulatory framework in Illinois, that's not possible. At least the idea of reusing a container.
I mean, we
like
emphasize using packaging that's recyclable, right? That's about the best we can do in Illinois. You know, just cut down on the plastic and try to do as much as, but you know, a lot of the pieces and parts that you have to use for child resistant are sometimes be plastic.
Yeah.
So, you know, we're always experimenting, talking to new, you know, ancillary businesses, suppliers of different types of packaging, and we're always trying to optimize for cost, for look, for quality, and for you know, if it's recyclable.
Yeah. Well, and honestly, I think as a consumer, there's also some choices that you can make that make a big difference. But, you know, one of the things is having your own battery and reusing that battery versus, you know, having disposables that every single batteries are a huge environmental impact too. So that's, you know, there are certain things that are decisions you can make as a consumer to try to lower the impact a little bit. But yeah, it's hard.
Were there any other product misconceptions or any just general misunderstandings within the industry that you wanted to address? I have one other one in mind, but I just wanted to give you the floor. We kind of took on the stuff is too dry. Well, kind of a result of the regulatory framework. Not that you wouldn't want to offer the most freshest bud in the world, right?
Yeah.
You can't. So any other thoughts with regard to kind of misconceptions?
I'm sure I'll think of 20 after we get off the call. I can't think of anything I'd highlight right now. What else did you have in mind?
Before I get to that, you mentioned remediation, and we've actually talked to Willow Industries, and they don't do they say they don't do remediation anymore. They do kill steps. Do you guys have to employ remediation or kill steps at all? It sounds like you're familiar with it. So
I'm not familiar enough with the actual process of cultivation. I hadn't, or you know, it's just not my strong suit. It's something that we'd have to talk to someone at the cultivation center. I'm not really sure what kill steps means.
It sounds like, honestly, the difference from the company's perspective, it sounded like a kill step is integrated into your SOP versus remediation, where you're oh, our product failed, now we have to remediate.
Absolutely. Anyone, you know, obviously the absolute best way to deal with any testing issues is from the very moment that you make your clones, right? You don't want to make flower that has pests or has mold or has microbial issues and then try to fix that after the fact. It's nearly impossible. It's extremely expensive, and it results in, even if you can make it work, it results in bad product. So the way that we deal with it is just militant and constant review of our product at every step of the way. Very intense pest management procedures at every level, very intense environmental controls, both during the grow, during the cure phase area. That's absolute 100%. That's the correct way to deal with the testing issues. As for remediation, I think that will vary from cultivator to cultivator. And I'm not even sure, I know that certain people will do ozone or whatever it is, but it's not
What would be
something
great
that
is we talked about getting an interview with our friend from California who's helping us out at our cultivation partnership now.
Yeah.
So maybe we should we'll save that one for when we can.
Yeah, that's definitely more in his field, pun intended.
For sure.
His cannabis field. Cool. I will pin that one. Okay, so the other misconception that I had in mind doesn't necessarily have to do so much with policy. It's something, Jonah, I don't know if you'd be comfortable with talking, like telling me the story you heard, but you told me about an interesting interaction that you had with a club. Let's just say you're trying to do a partnership with a club, and they were like, "Nah, we don't want to work with you because." Do you recall what I'm talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. And we can kind of make that a bridge into talking about seeds and home grow. So as the marketing guy, I'm always looking for more partnerships and working with cannabis curious people, cannabis connoisseurs, people who are just involved and passionate or want to learn more about cannabis. And one of my locations found out about like a kind of a growers club, and they're like, hey, we'd love to bring you over to our store, say hi, meet you, like learn about what you guys do, what you're passionate about. Maybe we can work together, tell our network about you guys and what you do, and you can share information about us. And they were pretty receptive and met with them, but then we're like, well, we feel a little uncomfortable because of what we've heard about your stance on home grow. And everyone at the shop was like, we have a stance on home grow? That's controversial. They had no idea what they were talking about. So, that was kind of the issue. And it's great that we could bring it up here. So, we could try to kind of clear the air, as it were, about NuEra's stance on home grow. And one, for me, the best way to kind of talk about that is an experiment that we tried that failed. Should I talk about that, Cole?
Yeah,
so I
please.
was working with out at the Hillcrest Cultivation Center when we were involved there, which we're not anymore. But when we were, we were brainstorming about home grow, and everyone out there, obviously in the cultivation, they all grow. I've tried it out. I'm a medical patient. Then people are passionate about doing, and we're like, well, there doesn't seem to be a clear route yet for how we could sell our own seeds or anything else at our dispensaries for the strains that we make. We're still waiting for approval or a mechanism from the state to be able to do that, even though it's somehow kind of written into the primary rules and regulations way back in the day. There's never been a approved process for how you do that. So therefore, what I've seen is no cultivators made seeds available. So then we were like, well, how else can we attack this problem and make it more possible for people who are cannabis enthusiasts, medical patients who want access to seeds to grow? What if we partnered with seed growers in Illinois? So independent companies that are doing their own, company, like, they have these things available, they sell them online, there's all sorts of people that can get them. Maybe we could partner with them and then make those seeds available at our stores. So we can educate our medical customers, hey, one of the huge advantages about being a medical patient in Illinois is that you can grow cannabis. And then here are some companies and some products that you could purchase for growing your own cannabis. And so we went down a whole long, line of, activity, set it all up. And then we're like, all right, we approached our regulator, because we always do that. We need to make sure that we're not crossing any line or we're not going to get in trouble. for something, and they said, no, you're not allowed to do it. You have not been approved to sell other people's seeds in your dispensaries. And that was I had actually been in touch with you because I was like, hey, I got big news. We're going to launch something. I want to launch it on the Chillinois podcast first.
Yeah.
And then it turned out that we were unable to do it. So, one, it would be, we need a letter writing campaign. We need really something. We need on all sides to be contacting our regulators to say, this is crazy. Cultivators should be able to bring seeds and clones to the market. And then number two, I'm hoping that, this can be a way for us to clear the air with your potential listeners. NuEra definitely is not opposed to homegrown. In fact, we were working on trying to make it more possible for more people to be involved in that activity of growing at home.
Yeah.
And in fact, it's one of the things that we highlight when we talk to people about the benefits of, getting a medical card is the ability to do a home grow is a big advantage. And we tell people that in our stores all the time, right? When we talk about the benefits of medical cards. I think, people worry that because we're also involved in cultivation, that would be a thing that would be seen as competition. But the truth is, because people grow tomatoes in their yard or in their, balcony, doesn't mean that supermarkets go out of business because they also sell tomatoes. We see it as complementary, and we think that that having greater access for that will be good for the industry overall.
I love that you used the example of tomatoes because I always also try to use that example.
Oh, really? Yeah.
In fact, Laura, if you've not heard of it, I encourage you to search up the tomato model by Ed Rosenthal. He's a very famous cannabis person, and it literally makes the point that you just made, except I'll share it actually here in just a moment, just because it's relevant. But Jonah, I wanted to provide a perspective from the state that mirrors what you just said. We asked the CROO, why aren't there seeds in dispensaries, right? And this is their answer. I'm going to display it on the screen, and if folks want to listen to this episode, they can. I asked Danielle, who was then CROO, about seeds in dispensaries, and they said, to CRO's knowledge, there are no dispensaries selling seeds. There would likely need to be a change to our seed-to-sale software, BioTrack, to allow for the movement of dynamic products like seeds. There's no requirement for medical licensees to supply seeds, which of course, right? But it sounds like there's a technical issue actually that's preventing it. And from what I've heard, not asking you to weigh in on this, but what I've heard is that the state is working on a contract with a new vendor, potentially. The potential is a new vendor, but definitely I've heard there's a contract conversation going on, and what it could involve is changes like this, either to BioTrack or delivered in a new potential solution. So
yeah,
and there's a
like
lot
such
of
an easy fix,
right?
Yeah, and there are a lot of areas of the law where there are things that you can neither do nor not do because just the law doesn't say anything about the specifics of it. So the agencies, when they, when you come to them and you say, we would like to do X, the answer is the regulations do not give us the authority to, allow that or not allow it. And so a lot of the times that's what you end up running into. But
yeah. So let me quickly read the tomato model, which I think you are really going to love because it's like basically exactly what you said. The model for cannabis legalization is already out there. It's tomatoes. More tomatoes are grown in America by home gardeners than are produced commercially. Yet there is a robust commercial market for tomatoes and tomato products of all types: canned, vine ripened, organic, sauces, soups, ketchup, etc. At the same time, small-scale specialty cultivators do well selling their produce at farmers markets, and home gardeners with extra tomatoes share the bounty with their neighbors as gifts in trade or through informal sales. Cannabis could be handled in the same way. Commercial growers can thrive side by side with home and specialty cannabis cultivators.
I also think that you know, and leaning into the metaphor a little bit, when I've grown tomatoes, it just has made me appreciate tomatoes more, right? Like it has made me more of a connoisseur. Like if I'm growing tomatoes at home, I'm like more excited about the rare, you know, heirloom tomato at the farmer's market that I've never seen before. It's not like I'm only going to eat my tomatoes and then I just don't care about other people's tomatoes type of thing. So I agree. It's not, it's also, quite frankly, a huge pain in the ass to grow cannabis. It's a tremendous amount of work. It takes a long time. You have to have a lot of knowledge. It's not like all of a sudden, if you allow it, 100% of consumers are just going to go grow their own plants. The truth is, it's too hard and it's too much work. The majority of people won't. A, and B, there's a tremendous amount of variety and product types that as producers, we're able to bring the consumers that they wouldn't be able to produce at home, right? So it doesn't matter if you have a really beautiful and healthy home grow, if at some point you're looking for some really good quality RSO, or you would like to try an edible, or you're really feeling like you'd like to, you know, get some bubble hash, these are not things that you can readily produce at home. And so those are always things that are going to be coming through the channels of the licensed producers.
So really quick, just again, in the spirit of clearing the air, I want to discuss where people may have been coming from. And luckily, I just spoke to the executive director of the CBAI, so I really am going to be able to clear the air on this issue. First of all, NuEra is a member of CBAI, the Cannabis Business Association of Illinois. And the experience that you had, Jonah, came, I would guess, from this article, which is an article written in 2019. And it's the headline, we'll have it in the link in the podcast description, is medical marijuana growers are lobbying for licenses that also would allow them to control the supply of recreational pot in Illinois. And it talks about the Medical Cannabis Alliance of Illinois, which ended up becoming the Cannabis Business Association of Illinois, and the executive director, former Senator Pamela Altoff, who I just spoke to, is the head of that. And at the very bottom of this article, which talks about mainly licensing, which we can talk about maybe later, but since we're talking about home grow and we wanted to clear the air on this, this is the paragraph most people point to. There's a paragraph in this article that says, in addition to licensed growers, there's also a question of whether and how much people will be allowed to grow at home. A previous bill proposed 5 plants per home, which licensed growers and law enforcement oppose. That's the line that people draw to CBAI. And I asked CBAI about this, and Pamela said that as an organization, they do not have a stance, which I suppose look, I'm not going to try to prove whether or not that's true or false. What I can say is that members of the organization definitely have taken a stance in the past, which is to oppose. So I'm glad to have gotten you on the record as a supporter, and thank you for clearing the air. I guess the last thing I'll ask on this topic, and because nothing exists, don't consider this a litmus test. Nothing exists. So my question is entirely hypothetical. But if there were to be a measure that was introduced that would allow all adults to grow at home, would it be far-fetched to maybe see NuEra put some lobbying dollars behind whoever's sponsoring that bill? So that, because the reason I asked that is because I asked Pam, she was trying to say, look, we don't have a stance on the organization. I was like, but wouldn't it be, if these companies are trying to get brand loyalty, what better way to do it than to lead the charge and say, hey, as a cannabis company, I made sure that the criminalization of cannabis came to an end. I feel like that's such a powerful statement to be able to say as a cannabis operator, until home grow for all is a thing. Nobody can say that.
Mm-hmm. I appreciate the question. I guess that the answer to a hypothetical like that, it's hard. The truth is that I'm aware of, we're not actively putting lobbying dollars into any particular measure. So like, would the organization do it? I don't know. I think we would support it. It's just generally not how we've operated, but we would not oppose it. We would be excited to support the idea that people should be able to grow. And let me say something, right? Like, it's easy to say it as a hypothetical, you support it. We're a business. We're trying to make our business sustainable. If the measure was people at home can grow, 300 plants and sell it and distribute it by bike to their closest friends, while at the same time we're like subject to a bunch of other regulations, we probably wouldn't support that, right? If it's really cannabis for your personal use and at home, absolutely. It just makes for a more vibrant cannabis culture and like you said, a truly legalized market, and that would be great.
Yeah, I understand the spirit in what you just said. I just want to say that, the only reason I slightly disagree with you is I just wish we could, because I agree people should play by the rules, and we should play by the same rules. There should be, that I feel like that's the spirit of your question. I just really hope that we stop dealing with cannabis as a criminal offense. I think we should deal with it as maybe like a business offense. Like, so if you were doing something like that, well, hey, you're not paying these regulatory fees, you're not paying taxes, you're not doing this, and this. And maybe if it rises to a level, you might find yourself in jail. But I hate that it seems like the first answer for any cannabis infraction is go to jail. It's like, hey, hold on. I thought we learned our lesson there.
Yeah. Right. Absolutely. Yeah. And you won't see me disagree with that. It's like any other business, right? It's
yeah, I totally get it.
It's, you got to pay your employees by the book, and you have to pay insurance, and you have to pay taxes, and like it's the same sort of thing. But yeah, absolutely. Like, there's no reason that we would oppose that. And and going back to what Pam was saying, at the end of the day, I think she's probably right that most of the businesses don't have a strong stance on it either way, because they're really focused on having a strong stance on the things that are really a lot more survival or life or death situations for them.
Right, like license limitations.
here's the thing that I'll say 100% I am worried about as a business operator in Illinois. And the truth of the day is, like, we run a business. At the end of the day, we're here and we're supposed to, like, economically and financially make it make sense. If you ask me, what am I worried about? Am I more worried about the rules around home grow, or am I more worried about the sales taxes that we're paying for, that consumers are charged in Illinois? Absolutely, my priority as a business person, how I feel personally is going to be different. But as a business person, we have to work on getting a tax situation that makes sense. We're seeing it already with Missouri, right? I believe I've heard through the grapevine, some of the Missouri border stores are down to selling 25% of what they used to sell. And of course, if you were within a short drive of Missouri, would you pay, I don't know, 40% effective tax rate, or would you like drive 20 minutes and get product that is at a much more reasonable price? And I think that really hurts everybody in the industry in Illinois. It hurts consumers, and it hurts business people, and it's going to hurt all the social equity licensees when they're up and running, because it's very difficult to be competitive and to really, be fair to consumers ultimately, when you might be paying over 40% of tax in sales tax for a purchase, right?
Yeah. And I realize you have to set your prices to match the regulations you comply with, right? You can't cut off your nose to spite your face. But I just, I was really happy to hear you got $180 ounces coming out, because that's like relatively unheard of in Illinois from at least my last, check. Again, I don't shop often. I grow myself and everything, but I feel that taxes are definitely a valid point, and you're absolutely right. Like, just to add to your point, Illinois is one of the few states with a sliding scale of taxes that increases with the potency, which doesn't really make sense, but I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to go there, just to, like, we're not doing philosophy right now. But my thing is, I feel like it's a little unfair to blame it up totally on taxes, just because, again, I know you have to set the prices higher to meet and make sure you still make money and can comply with the regulations. But like, I feel like it's again unfair to say that it's completely taxes, because you'll see eighths priced at like $20 in Missouri right now, you know, and that's without taxes. You're right, but it's like the product is already so cheap that I feel like that's not really a fair comparison, apples to oranges, you know.
No, absolutely. I mean, the taxes are only one portion of the equation. A lot of it has to do with competition. You know, as there's going to be more and more producers, the prices will come down for everybody. A lot of it has to do with the cost of complying with regulations, right? Like the more regulations there are, the more expensive it is to operate, and there's only a certain point that people get
Right.
to. But we're seeing it in Illinois generally. I think prices are trending down over time, and you'll see it from us that we're really focused on being able to have some products that are, as we mentioned with our new heavy freight offering. We want to be able to provide options for people that make sense. Absolutely.
I mean, I also think the comparison to, you know, Missouri is not necessarily, you know, completely valid as well. It's a different state, different regulations. It costs a different amount of money to bring product to the market. You know what I mean? It's a separate case. Every state in you know,
It's
United
Crazy.
States, it
Well,
has
and the other thing is,
completely separate. There's no standardization, you know?
yeah. And I think, and one of the things that I understand have started happening is also the demand is high in those, you know, those first months after legalization in any given state are such a crazy time period of like hyper growth and like demand far outstripping supply, and like kind of like the market forces coming together. But I think, you know, I've started to hear rumblings that there might be some flower shortages in Missouri for a little bit, and so we'll see what happens there overall. But the truth is, even if you got to a hyper competitive market with very cheap to produce cannabis like Michigan is. In Michigan, you can grow outdoors, literally just like out in a field with the sun providing all of your lights. The regulations are much easier. The licenses are much easier to get. So overall, the like starting prices are much like the price to operate is much lower and the competition is much higher. So the prices are low. But even if you're considering pretty low prices at any price point, if you have to add 40% on top of it at the end, that's going to make things literally almost twice as expensive, right? So I do think that is going to continue playing a really big important part here.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. You know, when you put it that way, 40% is almost half. So yeah,
it's insane. Yeah.
Okay, so thank you for getting into that. I got one last kind of question on pricing, and then I'd like to talk about cultivation acquisitions and how all that works, and then maybe we can start to wrap up the show. I wanted to know, like, what I have a feeling like everybody's just like watching each other, but like from an operator's perspective, like what is it? Oh, and I also wanted to say, Laura, before I move on to this question, I apologize for asking the question that I asked about committing lobbying dollars, only because I now realize maybe you don't maybe hold the pocket purse for the company, and so you can't say today, hey, I'll put 20,000 behind that motherfucker. You know, like you can't necessarily say that. So I wanted to just apologize in that vein for asking that question. You know,
no, it's your killer journalist instincts. It's a good question, and absolutely no apology necessary at all.
Sure. So pricing, how does that, like, I'm just curious to hear it from an operator's perspective. I've never really broached this subject before, but I feel like everybody's kind of like watching each other, and you know, to hear a $180 ounce of flower, I feel like that's going to perk up some ears. Am I right? Or is everybody kind of like, I just feel like everybody's like watching and they're like, oh, that price just went down, we're going to go down too. You know, like, is that how it works? So like,
I mean,
that's how all markets work.
If you run a hot dog shop and there's a hot dog shop across the street, and the hot dog shop across the street selling all their hot dogs for $1 more, and everyone's going to their store, right? Probably going to happen. You know, our heavy freight, that's definitely for the 420 holiday. I'm not sure if we're going to be able to continue to offer the same price point forever, but we definitely really wanted to have a really fun offering at that time. So that's where you're getting that price from. And also look out for doorbuster discounts on that heavy freight for 420 as well. So that price is potentially going to go even lower for the 420 holiday.
Nice.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, okay. Yeah. It sounds like it's just like every other business, like you say. I mean, I guess what I'm just trying to get a feel for is it like, does it feel cutthroat? Does it feel intense? As a consumer, it feels slow going, and it's like, when the fuck are the prices going to fall? You know?
I mean, the other thing about it is, you know, how about this solution? All the cultivators get together and collude on what the price is supposed to be. Right, so that we're not fighting each other. Like, let's just set the price so it's fair for the consumers. Like, that's illegal, actually, right?
Yeah, that is extremely illegal.
Like, talk to other companies and like come up with a price, right? So it all has to do with the market factor.
I'm on this CBAI board, and like as part of the board orientation, we get like, I can't even remember. We might have had to sign something. It's part of the bylaws. It's like, there will be no pricing conversations. You cannot collude on pricing. You cannot agree. Like, it's literally illegal. And so, the incentive when you're a business is always to be like just a little bit cheaper than your competitor, so people will come to you, but not so much so you're undercutting yourself. It's how it works, right? So, but yeah, definitely people are watching what everyone else is doing. People aren't coordinating on pricing at all.
Sure. Cool. Well, thanks for weighing in. I was always curious to hear from an operator's perspective what it must be like. So yeah, I know we kind of talked about it a few different ways, the new cultivation acquisition, but can you just tell me a little bit more about that? First of all, again, what happened, recapped it, because I get confused. You mentioned Hillcrest, but then you mentioned IESO, but more to the point, again, trying to give people a peek behind the curtain as to what you have to deal with. I'd love to talk about like the transition between cultivation centers, what it looks like, what it means, what it's required. But yeah, let's talk about anything and everything with regard to that topic.
Absolutely. So yeah. So in terms of the separation, so Hillcrest, when I say Hillcrest, and this is something that perhaps is more my own internal, the way that I refer to it, Hillcrest is the town where it's located. But that's the cultivation center that is now Legacy. And so that cultivation center has had a long kind of history of transfers, I guess. It was originally licensed, I believe, to PharmaCann back when the licenses were issued. It was a PharmaCann, and then there was some sort of deal between PharmaCann and MedMen. And MedMen was supposed to acquire that cultivation center, but then MedMen really started having very serious financial issues. And this is back in 2020, and that transfer, I don't know the details, but for some reason that transfer didn't materialize. And then that's when NuEra back in 2020 then acquired that cultivation center from PharmaCann. That PharmaCann has had at the time 2 cultivation centers. They also have one in Dwight, Illinois. So they were, I guess, divesting from that particular asset. NuEra acquired it. And the separation of the retail assets from NuEra and the cultivation assets from NuEra really it was a business decision that had to do with, different visions for the future of the company from the ownership, and they decided to go in different directions. And so we have been exploring, as I mentioned earlier, really understanding the benefits and importance of vertical integration, really understanding the importance of being able to control your destiny a little bit, maybe have a say and have control over the quality of products and the types of products that you're able to bring to market. All of that seemed really important. So we've been exploring different ways that we could become vertically integrated again. And so IESO seemed like a natural partner because they're a cultivation center that didn't have retail. And so they, as the the industry has evolved and has changed over time, the importance of having that relationship is really, has really grown over time, because often, as you can imagine, cultivation centers will prioritize their own brands of retail, and their best product will go to them, et cetera. And so if you're on your own, it can be harder to get that like top selection and to really get um, to get priority. And so ISO was a natural partner for us. They had the cultivation, we had the retail. So we've started working with the team, getting to know them, doing a bunch of due diligence, and have found a way that we can really work together to kind of bring each other strengths, give them the strength that comes from having retail, and then we can have the strength that comes from having access to their cultivation capacity, their excellent kitchen and extraction operations, and bring in some expertise that we also had, having had experience that with cultivation and with brands for a while, and really inject that new energy and new life and new procedures and new strains into the operations that were there before. Yeah, that's how we're thinking about it. It just seemed like a really good match, and it's something we've been working on for a while now, and is finally starting to become like a real thing that we can finally talk about, and that's finally going to start resulting in products on shelves. So we're excited about that.
Super cool. And I'm just curious, are you able, what do either of you know, like, I'm just curious to know about what the actual transition between cultivation centers looks like, as like from the regulatory side. Like, for example, when you did the legacy thing, or when you work with ISO, like, do you have to contact the Illinois Department of Ag?
The answer to that question is always yes. Meaning always we're in constant communication with regulators to be doing everything by the book. I tell this to our employees too. We're an extremely regulated industry. We live and die by following the rules and everything that we do. And so any transfer of ownership and any license in Illinois needs to be approved by the appropriate regulators. So if you're talking cultivation, or say like an infusion license, that's in the jurisdiction of the Department of Agriculture, and they would have to approve that. If it is at the retail level, that would be the IDFPR, the Illinois Department of Financial Professional Regulation. So what the actual specifics of the process looks like, it usually takes multiple months for an approval of an ownership transfer. That's why when I talk about what we're doing with ISO right now, it's a partnership. It's a collaboration. The ownership of ISO remains with ISO at this time, until a Department of Agriculture approval process has been completed. That process is essentially an extremely intense background check, right? For any ownership in any cannabis license in Illinois, all of the owners have to submit fingerprints, and all of the entities need to be disclosed, and all of the background, and there's various rules about who is or is not eligible for cannabis licensing. So, to give an example, there are certain criminal offenses that would preclude you from owning any part of a cultivation center. Or if you have been active in another state where your license was revoked because you broke the rules, you might be precluded from having a cultivation center. So there's a whole set of like vetting that happens at the state level, and that could take months. And you've seen it with other acquisitions and changes that have been announced. Like, how long ago did, I don't know, Cresco and Columbia Care announce that? But it just takes a while to jump through the regulatory and then the financing hoops that takes to like finalize a transaction like that.
Yeah. I figure it's a lot of paperwork, but does the state like walk you through it? I'm just curious, like, what your experience with is like with the state, because there's a lot of talk about standardizing things right now, so.
Yeah, I think that they're working really hard on that. One of the things that's hard for these agencies is they're actually pretty small agencies, and it's a small amount of people trying to do a lot, especially with so many new licenses coming online and all of the needs for attention and time and work that generates. And so I think there's a pretty short-staffed, very like well-intentioned group of people trying to contend with a pretty complicated set of rules, right? So things can be a little bit hard to navigate sometimes as an operator, and certainly anyone that's been licenses can attest to that. Like it can be a little bit hard to navigate, but I do think that they are, in my experience, certainly, and I was just in Springfield meeting with some regulators last week, that their intention is to help you navigate the process and make sure that it's all by the book, but but certainly not to complicate intentionally or slow things down. And there is definitely talk a lot in the department of standardizing certain processes, including the ownership transfer type of thing.
Yeah. So obviously your goal is to not get your hands slapped. Right. So that's why you go to them and ask about things like seeds and the cultivation center transfer. But not to get into specifics, I'm not asking you to tell me if you've gotten your hands slapped, but what I'm asking is do the regulators kind of rely on you to reach out to them, or do they have like a regular meeting with you, or do they check in?
Oh
like,
my
hey?
goodness. And that's one of the things I wanted to talk about when we talk about like what it costs to produce things.
Yeah.
So we do have a cultivation facility in Michigan. And I was very involved in setting up that cultivation facility and have seen and experienced firsthand the difference. So I'll give you a sense, Cole, of like the type of regulatory burden and compliance and rules that we have in Illinois versus other states. When we opened our facility in Michigan, you have 2 inspections a year. Your very first inspection, meaning no inspector has been there ever, it's the very first time you're going to be issued your license, was over FaceTime. They didn't even show up, right? Like you were just like walking them around and we're like, oh, here's our camera, here's this, here's that. Very simple, very quick, easy rules. In Illinois, a cultivation facility is inspected once a week. Every single week you have an inspection, multi-hour inspections, every aspect of your operations. When you're an operator at the retail or the cultivation level, you have a very close relationship with your inspector and you're in constant communication with them, right? We had our, because of the weather, we had a power outage yesterday in our Chicago store. Immediately, the very first thing that you do is you called your inspector and you said, hey, we have a power outage. We have to close. We can't be open because the Wi-Fi is down, whatever it is. You're going to open, half an hour late. You're going to close. You're going to move the location of a cabinet. Anything that you do in your stores is A, subject to the regulation of your agencies that oversee you, and B, we're constantly keeping an open channel of communication and like total transparency on that. And I tell this because sometimes, of course, my employees, a lot of these rules make our stores not very fun. Like, I hate that so many stores in Illinois feel like going to, renew your driver's license, DMV. It's just like very staid, and I wish we could show product, and you wish that you could have more interesting events, and you really could provide. I wish that our windows were not all blocked off, so it just like feels so jail-like. I wish I could have like huge, beautiful store windows and like product on display, and I could let you smell things. And so that could often be a frustration for our employees who just like keep pushing this, like, well, why can't we do this? Why can't we do that? And the truth is, we live and die by regulation, right? We're an extremely regulated industry. The risk of having your license disciplined or suspended or revoked is literally life or death. And so you have to be extremely careful with following every single rule. And people that have pushed that boundary in other states and maybe in Illinois have found there's a really high price to pay to not following the rules.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for getting into all of that, because it's something that frankly I don't know about, and it's very interesting to hear the differences, between the states.
When you think about like corporate overhead in terms of the amount of like rules and making sure that every process is following the rules that it takes when you have a 3 or 4 hour inspection every week, versus an inspection twice a year via FaceTime. Like, think about the man hours of people that are just like literally focusing on making sure that this goes perfectly every time, right? It's expensive, and it's incredibly important, right? But honestly, I also think that's one of the reasons we have had very, I would say, this is complicated. In Illinois, we have an industry that's very highly regulated, and that creates a lot of issues. But also, I feel like it's the optimist in me at the end of the day. It's just like, yeah, it's really frustrating, but like, you could be Indiana. So,
Indiana,
like
and
I just,
also, let me butt in. And also, it really makes it so that that the product that you're purchasing from a dispensary is absolutely as safe as it can possibly be, right? You know
and
what I
I
mean?
think about this a lot in when we had the scandal with the vapes a couple of years ago with like the solvents and stuff. And I think about it when I see some of the Delta 8 shops and some of these, it's just, honestly, that is stuff that you're putting straight into your lungs. Like, we're not saying it's like, well, there might be, maybe you buy a pair of shoes and there might be some solvents in your shoes, and like, that's probably not great for you, but like, no, this is stuff that you're putting in your body, and you're putting it in the way, like, the most like direct, like, you're basically like putting it straight into your bloodstream and straight into your brain pretty much. And it is, it's frustrating that it feels like there's so many rules, but my God, we need them, right? It's a safety concern.
I mean, who
It's how
knows
you can feel safe.
who
Yeah.
knows what processes they're using for these Delta 8 products? You know what I mean? Some might be amazingly, perfectly wonderful, clean, like, but you could have other people who are just like using whatever heavy metals, pesticides, like it's completely unregulated.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, that's why for me, if you're not able to be a medical patient and home grow in the state of Illinois, and you want to be here, go to your actual dispensary. Don't go to
Yeah.
the Delta 8, because that it's all of our stuff is above the board. It's completely tested, and there's nothing funny going on, which potentially could be happening from
Yeah.
your street dealer, from your Delta 8 shop, So.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, it's some pretty nasty stuff that could be, especially on things like vape products, for example. So, yeah, it's ultimately, it makes it so that I think when you go to cannabis dispensary in Illinois, you can feel very safe that you know exactly what you're getting, where it came from, and what's in it. Truly. And it's, as a consumer, I think that gives me peace of mind.
Yeah. So I'd love to maybe close on the topic of social equity, which my transition that I'll make to that topic is like the Delta 8 thing is definitely, like you say, I would not touch that with a 10-foot stick. Although it's kind of funny that I say stick. I think we had one time a company at the beginning of the Delta 8 boom. I think they were like High Stick or something, and they came on and tried to tell me about Delta 8, and I was like, it's what? You what? Yeah, don't touch that, people. Definitely don't touch that. To the point of street dealers and stuff, you run the same risk. I will just say that, I wish, and I know I've kind of already made this point, and this is how I'll segue to social equity, but I wish there was a route from legacy to legit, let's say, that existed in Illinois, because frankly, our social equity program is, it gave priority to people that lived in DIAs that were, affected, were able to prove that they were affected by the war on drugs, or there are some other variables that they've since added. It just feels though that it's like they're like golden tickets because they're limited. It's like, yeah, we're gonna we're going to pay restitution to what we've done as a society, right? We're going to do this social equity thing, but we're only going to give a few people the chance. That's what it really feels like. And so I guess the reason I even bring that up is because, again, I think that some people would love to be legal and would love to be able to say, hey, I've tested this has been tested by all the same laboratories that test the biggest companies in the goddamn United States. And I did it myself. I'm a small company, but with the way that it was even structured, so like regulations aside, because the regulations are such overhead, it's like an extravagant overhead that is hard to pay for and comply with, right? But just to get the license itself, like I know that they've lowered the fees, but the very first lottery, you could submit, I believe, an unlimited number of applications. So people that could pay more had a better chance of winning because they submitted more applications. And I know
you see that in the results. There are people that got like 15, right? It's crazy.
Yes.
Yeah,
well, and
yeah,
it seems most of the we've covered this on the show in the past, and if I can remember too, I'll try to put links from reporting by Grown In, but it seems like most of the new licensees, or at least people that were granted licenses, conditional licenses at the time, had ties to either existing operators or people that were just really well connected, and it begs the question, was this what we meant by social equity? I'm not saying these people weren't affected by the war on drugs, and that's why I have to be a little careful with this. I'm not trying to say that you weren't really affected. I'm not saying that. I'm saying maybe the limit that we've set, like, I don't know, it seems like it's achieving the opposite effect, especially because we deal with cannabis with the criminal branch of the government, sorry, that's just me getting on my soapbox. Do you have any thoughts about license limitations? That's another thing that's actually the main point of that article earlier, by the way. Most people take away the home grow part of this article, but the main point of this article is talking about how there were originally the law. Sorry, let me just back up here a second. So again, the headline is medical marijuana grows.
So Cole, I'm so sorry. I'm gonna have to run a little bit earlier. I leave you guys with Jonah, who's awesome, and you can kind of like wrap it up. I hope I have this meeting. I hope it's something we can talk about at the next interview. Hopefully,
Yes.
If you'll have us again. But there is this. There is a TV show that's getting produced about the cannabis industry, and they don't know yet when it's getting made. They're sort of in the early development phases, and they just wanted to talk to people in different states. They're like in the research phase, but it's looking like it's becoming real. So hopefully that's something that we'll see sometime soon, and I think would be exciting to talk to you guys about. So this has been such an awesome conversation. I really appreciate it. I appreciate the time. I hope I didn't say anything to get myself in trouble, but I think it's great to be able to talk about some of the misconceptions in the industry, and really appreciate what you do for all of the Illinois cannabis community.
Yeah, I appreciate your time, the knowledge you imparted, and your candor today. Look forward to the next time we speak. So,
awesome. Talk soon.
Yeah,
Thank
take
you.
care.
Bye-bye.
So Jonah, we'll wrap this up here, but it's I think it'd be good to clear the air on this topic as well. And thanks for hooking us up with Laura. That's I will echo what she said earlier. As far as marketing goes, man, you're a rock star from my perspective, because you're one of the few companies that are willing to talk about these topics candidly. And I'd like to think that you're rewarded for it. Like I say, with brand loyalty, because I know that my listeners respect because frankly, not a lot of people that are licensed are willing to talk about these subjects. So thanks, Jonah.
Yeah, and thank you for the opportunity and the platform.
Yeah. So just really quick, we can clear the air on this and just give a little bit of history. This article, for folks that don't know, it talks about the formation of CBAI, and at the time they said the aim was to limit cultivation licenses being issued to competitors if pot was legalized. And so Pamela Altoff at the time, and I asked her about this quote. So if folks want to see how she responds, you can see it. But she said at the time, my organization believes they have the current capacity to meet the demand. Until we see substantive data that indicates differently, we support no new cultivation licenses. And that position was undermined by findings of an ongoing ongoing study commissioned by state lawmakers, right? And the study showed that demand would quickly outstrip supply in Illinois, which happens, as Laura mentioned earlier, at the beginning of any adult use thing, at the beginning of any launch of an adult use market. Sorry, I'm having trouble speaking here. So the study suggested licensing more growers, including allowing existing dispensaries to begin growing the product since they have already been vetted and authorized by the state to handle the drug. You guys, right? So it suggested licensing more, but still also giving you, current licensed people the ability to just get going, right? And so, like I said, it just seemed the CBAI opposed new licenses. One cultivator, I'm looking for the quote here. I believe it's a former CEO of Revolution Enterprises, Mark D'Souza, actually said, look, I welcome competition as long as it maintains current testing, which is something you guys were just saying, to ensure truth in labeling with contaminants below maximum allowed limits and weekly random checks by regulators. So I'm just curious, if you're able to speak, do you know what NuEra's stance is on licensing and competition and stuff like that?
We don't have an internal published stance as the company, so I'm not going to speak for the entire company. I will speak as the director of marketing, though, for the company on my opinion on that, which is the more the merrier. I mean, look at craft products in the liquor industry, right? It hasn't killed Coors to have Sam Adams, right? So I see it the same way in the cannabis industry. Let's have craft. That's great, and let's really launch that in a way that is sustainable, because I know there's a lot of problems with the current craft regulations in Illinois. So once again, look at other states, work with other states, see what they've done to be successful, and do it that way, and not just try to reinvent the wheel in your own weird Illinois ways. Is the thing that I've seen has been seemingly an impediment. But because I would say yes, we're standing with what that former CEO of Revolution said. It's like, as long as everyone's subject to the same regulations, then they should be able to, if possible, raise the funds, apply for the licenses, and do it in a way that's going to be possible for them to actually make a profit. You know what I mean? So
yeah,
I love craft beer. I love craft liquors. I love craft cannabis. I've tried it in many other places, and I hope that the same is going to come to Illinois, and as fast as possible.
Yeah. Well, hey, we covered a lot of ground today.
Sure did.
Is there anything you feel that we didn't touch on that you wanted to make sure to mention?
I mean, you know me, I'm the marketing guy, so I'll keep plugging away for my stuff. But I mean, I'd love to just make sure that we can continue the conversation on all sorts of these things that we started getting into. Would love to see if we can connect you with our grow consultant to talk about some of his perspective on coming from California into Illinois and those differences. It'd be great to talk to Laura again, just about what is it like to run a cannabis company. It's really fascinating. She's an amazing person, and she's had such an incredible journey, and to now be in this position is amazing. So it would be fun to continue the conversation with you further down the road. And then, like I said, a couple more plugs. With 420 coming up, we are launching new brands, all sorts of fun things to really celebrate the cannabis holiday. We are going to have events at our dispensaries on 420 at every single one of our locations in the parking lot. We're going to have free food. We're going to be raffling off all sorts of prizes, penny samples. We have a bunch of doorbusters that we're going to be doing. It's going to be, we're spending a lot of time and energy trying to make something really fun and that you'll remember, and an experience that you're going to love to have on 420. Our 420 deals start on 414. So 420 does not start on 420, it starts 414. So we're going to have up to 40% off of all sorts of amazing stuff. And we just really want to have the best possible cannabis Christmas that we can. And the way that NuEra is able to really also, set ourselves apart from the rest. Free trip to Jamaica. Let's say that again. Someone's going to win. Someone won last year, which means someone's going to win this year, which means that could be you. So definitely come enter. You can check out everything on this page right here. There's a form below on how to enter, and then you can also learn how you can get 9 extra entry points by coming into a NuEra dispensary, which really increases your chance of winning.
Very cool. There it is, folks. My apologies for butchering that link earlier. I realized what I did was I went to nuera.com/ganja vacations. The correct link is NuEraCannabis.com/ganja vacations. And it's possible you said that and that I was high and didn't type it correctly. But either way, we'll have it in the link for the podcast description for folks so that you can just click it and go right to this web page we're displaying right now. So awesome, Jonah. Well, thank you very much.
Thanks for the plug. Thanks for the time. Like Laura said, we're fans of the podcast for a long time, so it's a pleasure to be here. I also now have to run. So yeah.
Well, I've pushed my time with my guests. I'm just joking. But folks, I hope you found as much value in this conversation as I did. We'll see you in the next episode. Take care.